As you know, my name is Carrington the Tech Pro, and in this complete tutorial, I'm going to be taking you on Windows Server administration step by step with no steps skipped, right from beginning to the end. And this is the setup we are going to be using. You can see right here on the screen. So you can see we have 5 nodes I'm going to be using for this demo. And one interesting thing about this demo is that you can actually do it right at home. If you simply have a Wi-Fi, you can set it up at home. Even without a Wi-Fi, you can use VirtualBox. This very tutorial will be done using VirtualBox. So I'm going to be using installing virtual machines and a VirtualBox, setting the IP address, the configuration, and everything I'm going to be taking you through. Now let me just show you the step-by-step. Now if you go to my website, you can actually see the step-by-step of this demo. So let me just show you, because it's better you have the steps and you'll be able to follow it yourself, and that is what I do every time. Now, if you are joining me for the first time, you need to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any update from me. Now, this is my website. If you go to my website, you'll find a whole lot of free lessons, free tutorials, and books and courses that you can get for free. Now, this is what we are talking about. So we are going to be starting from part 1, how to set up Active Directory with VirtualBox step by step. So these are the steps we are going to be following. Now I'm going to move these to the second screen so that it doesn't distract me. So let's get started right now. So the first step, I'm going to, okay, let me just show you for a second what the first step is. So the first step requires that we download VirtualBox. We download and install VirtualBox and also download Windows Server and Windows 10. Windows Server can be downloaded from here. And what you need to download is the ISO. If you download the ISO, so if you come, you can see the ISO VAD and Azure. So download the ISO for Windows Server 2019 as well as Windows 10. Save the 2 ISOs in a folder on your system. I'm going to show you in my local system where I actually saved the 2 ISOs. Now, if I go to a drive in my system, my document, and I actually downloaded these 2 items and save them. So if I go to, you can see, let me see, ISO VAD no sync. So you can see the 3 items you are going to be using. So without wasting time, let's dive right in. Let me open up the VirtualBox and let's get started. So I'm going to open up VirtualBox. Let's see, a VirtualBox. Again, remember to subscribe, like, and share my video. Leave me a comment if you have any challenges whatsoever following my lessons. Please leave me a comment in the comment box below this video as well. So the first thing you want to do is to click on New. Once you click on New, enter the name. So according to the steps we are following, we have the name of the server is going to be DC. It's going to be our domain controller. And we have node 1, node 2, node 3, and node 4. So let's go to set the name of the server is going to be DC for domain controller. And you are going to choose Windows Server 2019 64-bit. That's what I'm using. I'm going to leave it at 2048. Leave everything at default. Leave everything as default. Now you can pause the video and read the explanation on the screen. So this is not an explanation of everything, but I'm going to be taking you through and explaining what is necessary. Now 50 GB for the hard disk, for the virtual hard disk for this machine. So simply create. So once you create it, you simply power it on. So you can right click and click on normal start, or simply click on this green button here, start. Now this is where you are going to select the the ISO you downloaded. So I'm going to start by going to add and choosing Windows Server 2019 ISO and click on open and click on choose and click on start. So that's basically what you need to do. And then it's going to start the normal setup of Windows. For now, everything looks small. So let me just go to scaled mode. Yeah, so that it becomes a little bigger. Later, we are going to be installing additions, I think VirtualBox additions or something like that, to be able to help us expand or increase the size of the screen. So I'm going to go next. I'm going to install. And the next thing you want to do, takes a little while. All right, so choose the second one. Windows Server 2019 desktop experience, standard evaluation desktop experience. In the next screen, you are going to choose custom install. So accept the license, go next, and choose custom install and go next as well. So it installs Windows Server 2019. While it is installing, we are going to start adding the next virtual machine, and I'm going to add this to be node 1. I'm going to call it node 1. Oh, sorry. So, okay, I clicked on cancel. So I'm going to call it node 1. So I'm going to call it node 1. And now I'm going to also choose Windows Server 2019 64-bit. You can also choose Windows 10. For me, I want to install the servers first at this time. So I'm going to click on next. Everything, I'm leaving it the same. Continue, continue, continue. 50 gig is okay. And I'm going to power it on as well. Now it's going to drag my CPU. So I'm going to kind of, maybe, yeah, this is fine. So I'm going to, let's choose add and choose Windows 2000, Server 2019 ISO, choose, and then so now it doesn't allow me to start, maybe because the other one is running. So let me just take it out. Yes. So let's remove it. We are going to add it later on. So let's check the status of this. So this is still installing. Our server is still installing at this point, but there is nothing wrong. Let's create the nodes. Node 1 is going to be Windows Server 2019. I'm going to create the nodes, but I'm not going to start the machine. I'm going next, 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 next. Okay. I'm going to also create another node. It's going to be node 2. Now you can actually choose Windows 10, but for me, I'm going to continue choosing Windows Server 2019 again. I'm going next, 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 next. Sorry for that distraction. Hello? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead to create another node. So I'm going to click on new. This time I'm going to say node 3. I'm going to choose Windows Server 2019. I'm going to click continue. I'm going to click on continue. I'm going to click on continue and then continue as well. Continue. So for now, we've created all the nodes we want. The laptop I added in the architecture I showed you can be actually added later on. So let's check the status of this installation. So you can see it is still installing, as you can see right here. So let's just wait for a couple of minutes. So once it completes, the installation is going to restart, and then we are good to go. So at this point, we are going to enter the password. So I'm going to choose a password. It requires complex password. Retype the password. All right, so it's going to finalize installation. After this installation, the next thing you want to do is to install VirtualBox additions or something like that. So first, let me just go to input and choose keyboard and choose Control-Alt-Delete. And then I'm going to enter the same login I created. And then it logs in. So you are going to go to, okay, allow it a few seconds to start. And you are going to, all right, so at this point, go to devices, go to optical drive, VirtualBox guest additions, that's the name. So say yes, yes, it's okay. And let's go back to devices, choose insert. So this VirtualBox guest addition is going to allow you to be able to maximize the screen and be able to make the screen feel adjust the screen size to feel to be full screen. So for some reason, okay, so let's go back here. I'm going to devices, optical devices, choose this and go to devices, insert. All right, so it comes up like this and choose run VirtualBox additions and go next, go next, go next. So it's going to install the guest additions and then you are going to restart. While that is happening, I'm going to the same install, go to node 1 and go to, okay, before we do the network settings, let's just complete one thing at a time. So let's allow it. So it's going to reboot. So while it's rebooting now, we are going to set the network setting in such a way that this virtual machine is going to connect with the host as well as other virtual machines. To be able to achieve that, go to the virtual machine settings and go to the network and choose bridge adapter. Choose bridge adapter and say okay, that is fine. So let's get back here. I'm going to log in again by saying keyboard insert Control Alt Delete. All right, so here we go. At this point, I can now increase or maximize, or I can adjust the screen size to full screen. Meanwhile, it's going to be full screen auto resize, that is fine. So allow a few seconds and it's going to assume a full screen, but the font is really, the display is really very small. So you are going to right click and go to display settings and just change it to 200%. So under scale, the layout, you're going to choose 200% and okay. So problem solved. So at this point, we are going to install the second virtual machine. So I'm going to go back here and start up node 1. So I'm going to click on start. And we are going to choose Windows Server 2019 next. Start as well. All right, so let's take some time, but it's okay. So basically the same process, so I may just speed it up as well. So let me just go next, install now. All right, so while the second machine is installing, let's now configure the domain controller as domain controller. All right, according to the instruction, to be able to configure a domain controller, you need to add a role. So you are going to click on add roles and features. And the feature you are going to add will be Active Directory services. So I'm going to go next, again, and okay, there is one thing I would like us to do before we do this. I'm going to cancel for now. So I would like to change the name of this computer. So I'm going to go to this PC. I'm going to go to this computer. I would like to change the name. So I'm going to properties. I'd like to change the name from change settings and change the name to DC. All right, so I'm going to say okay. So it requires that we restart the system. So I'm going to restart, that is fine. So let's check the status of the other one, not this one. Okay, while this one is still installing, our domain controller restarts. So it restarts and I'm going to go to input keyboard Control Alt Delete. I'm going to log in. And now we want to set up this system as a domain controller. Okay. So to do that, we need to add roles. In Server Manager, you are going to click on Add Roles or Features. So let's wait for a second. So here, we are going to click on add roles and features. The role we are going to add is server manager is collecting inventory. Okay, that is fine. So let's go here, go to next. It is fine. And we are going to add Active Directory services role. So we are going to look for Active Directory services. Active Directory domain services. Yeah, so we are going to click on Active Directory domain services. So I'm going to add features. So we are missing nothing. Okay, I'm going to go next. Okay, so you can actually select this if you want. So I'm going next. Alternate installation path. No, I'm going to just install. It's actually Active Directory domain services. So let's check the second installation to see where we are. Okay, so it's still installing. Okay. At this point, I would like to close this PowerPoint because it seems to be a distraction. So I'm going to just go to PowerPoint, close. And this is fine. This is installing. Okay. For the second node, which we are installing, so we are going to because installation just completed, so we are simply going to set it up as usual by creating a username and a password for this system. I'm changing the name of the computer to node 1. So this is still installing the Active Directory domain services, and this is starting up. Okay, so node 1, you can see node 1 is starting up. And we are going to simply set the username and the we are simply going to set the password for node 1. Alright, so I'm going to choose a password. Alright, so I'm going to go to inputs, keyboard, Control Alt Delete, and enter the password, and it's going to start. As usual, we're also going to set up the VirtualBox guest additions. So simply go to devices, optical drive, should be this one, and go a second time, insert guest additions. So hopefully it's going to pop up and allow us to it says insert guest addition disk, insert guest addition. So at this point, I will reboot this system, and I'm going to VirtualBox and set up node 2. So I'm going to start node 2. At this point, I'm going to choose the OS to be Windows Server 2019 ISO. I'm going to click on Start. This time is Server 2 now, and now many things are running, but it's okay. So these are server node 1. And node 1, we are going to go to first, let's log in, and then we set it to full screen. So first, and we now set it to full screen. So I'm going to go to view, full screen. So let's wait for a while. It's going to automatically resize to full screen. So it resizes itself to full screen, and the next thing we want to do... Oh, sorry.
It's no problem.
So sometimes Siri in the way, so let's just take out this. Let's just resize this to full screen. So let's change the display setting to be to change this scale up the size a bit to 200%. And this is fine. So have node 1 and node 2 set up. Now let's go back to VirtualBox, and we are going to settings of node 2, and we are going to also change the network to bridge adapter as well. All right, so let's check. Give me a second. Let's see. Okay, so Active Directory domain services installed completely in the DC. So we are going to close, and it requires that we restart the DC. So I'm going to go to DC and simply restart the DC. All right, so let's check our node 1. This is node 1 is okay, and this is node 2. So we need to continue setup of node 2. So node 1 is okay, it's ready. Node 2 is what is getting set up at this point. And also, our domain controller is also ready as a domain controller. There is a little bit we still need to do, so I'm going next. Custom install is going to be next. Okay. So there's something I need to explain to you. Now let's first check our domain controller to make sure it's fine. So I'm going here to input controller delete. So hopefully, I think I'm in the domain controller at this point. So you can simply go to local server. You go to local server, you can see there is the DC. Now if you go to tools right here, you can go to Active Directory users and computers right here. We go to Active Directory users and computers. It says to manage groups, to manage users and groups on this computer, use local users and group to manage users and group in the domain. Log in as a user with domain administrator rights. Perfect. Okay. There is something we still need to do. All right. Now, if you look at this place, it says something. We need to promote this server to a domain controller. That's the next step we need to follow. So promote this server to a domain controller. We are going to create a new forest because you have this question here that says select the deployment operation. So we are going to promote the server to a domain controller, and we are going to create a new forest. The root domain is going to be KTG. So you can choose any domain name, any name you like. .local is always good to add .local if you are working with a local domain. If the system you are configuring is your local domain. So I'm going to click on next. It says type the directory services restore mode password. Okay, no problem. We are going to do it. It's necessary. All right, so I'm going to click on next, and DNS for now. Leave the DNS is going to create its own DNS by itself. The NetBIOS domain name should normally I leave it as the domain name without the .local suffix. So that's fine. KTG is fine. So at this point, this computer, which we named DC, becomes our domain controller for this domain. Okay, and go to next, install. So while we wait for it to complete the installation, let's just go to this should be node 1, which is okay, and let's look at node 2, which was currently installing and is still installing. For this node 1 here, this computer here, which is node 1, for you to be able to join the domain, there is some things we need to do. I'm going to tell you. First, we have to allow the domain controller to complete its installation. Now I have the step-by-step in case you can also follow the step-by-step in my website. All right, so let's configure node 1 to be able to join this domain. We are going to do that first. Okay, so this is fine. Close. Now that the domain controller has been set up as domain controller, it's going to actually restart the system, and the system will now be the domain controller. It will now be part of the domain. So it takes a couple of seconds, but let's check the other installation. This is fine. This is continuing to install as well. Let's just go back. So while it continues, let's check this one. Let's check this one. Okay, so this is fine. It's restarting. So maybe we'll just complete the Node 2 installation at this point before we continue. All right, anyway, let's check the domain controller. So here we have the domain controller still trying to apply settings. It takes a while. And in case of Node 2 is coming up, so let's wait for a second as well. All right, so let's enter the passwords, or let's choose a password. All right, this is fine, and I'm going to log in. So input keyboard, Control-Alt-Delete, and we simply log in. That's fine. So let's check out domain controller. It's still applying settings. That is fine. Node 1 is okay. It's just waiting for us to configure it to join the domain. And Node 2 is coming up to speed. I'm going to devices, optical drives. I'm going to say VBox guest additions, and also again insert VBox guest addition image. This is going to allow us to scale the display size of the guests of the virtual machine to be able to fill the screen. So let's check what is happening here. This is still applying settings, and this is coming up. Okay, so we are going to remember we need to set the network settings for all of them to be bridge connection. So let's just check, let's just verify. I'm going to settings, network, bridge adapter, that is fine. Go to Node 1, settings as well, and check that is bridge. So it's going to, it has a bridge adapter. Okay. And finally check for Node 2, settings, and it's going to be bridge adapter. So all of them are okay. So this Node 2 trying to come up, and so now I've mixed up the whole thing. So okay, so this is Node 2. This is Node 2. So let's do the guest additions here. I think I first need to go to optical drive, guest additions, and then insert guest addition, see the image, and then it comes up. I'm going to click on it and say run. Going to next. Install. So while it's installing and restarting in Node 2, let's go check the Active Directory. Domain controller is still coming up, and in case of this, we are going to now restart the system. So since we don't have all the time, we have DC, we have Node 1, and we have Node 2. I would like to now give you an assignment. Please set up Node 3 yourself. So Node 2 comes up at this point. So we are going to log in and then set it to full screen. So I'm going to come to log in with the passwords and say OK. And it comes up, and I'm going to go to view and simply set it to full screen. When I set it to full screen, I'm going to wait for a few seconds, and it's going to switch to full screen mode after some time, and that is fine. And again, we need to scale the display. Let me just close this and scale the display settings to be 200%, just to make the icons to be bigger. All right, so we have our node 1, we have node 2, this is node 1, node 2, and then this is our domain controller. How do I know? If we go to this, you can see that it now tells you KTG administrator. So it's domain controller is right inside the domain. It cannot be outside the domain. So I'm going to log in with the same password. All right, so now we have all the systems up. We have this one, we have this one, and give me 1 second, let me just check to make sure everything is fine. So we have this one. I'm going to go to this. Sorry, let me just come here and check. So this computer, if I go to local server, the name is whatever. You can see this name here. So I'm going to close. So let's change the name to node 1. Or before we change the name to node 1, we are going to change the setting to be able to see the Active Directory domain controller. So let's first get the IP address, because for you to be able to connect systems to the Active Directory to be on the same network, you need to set the client's DNS server to be the IP address of the domain controller. So we need to know the domain controller's IP address. So I'm going to use cmd to say IP config. The IP address says 192.168.1.90. All right, so in this case now I'm going to come here and go to the network settings of this system and set the DNS to be 192.168.1.90. So I'm going to go to change the adapter options. I'm going to right click on this one and go to properties. And one thing you should do is to disable the IP protocol version 6 and then go to version 4 and go to properties and use the following DNS: 192.168.1.90, and alternate DNS. You can just put anything there and say OK and close. All right. Now we are going to allow this system to join the domain. So I'm going to go to this computer. First, I need to know which system is this. So this is node 1. So I'm going to go to this computer. I'm going to this PC and go to properties. Now we are going to configure it to join the domain. To do that, simply go to change settings and go to change. I'm going to change the name as well to node 1. Before we do that, there is one thing we need to do. Go to remote and set allow remote connections to this system. And also we need to change the firewall settings so that we'll be able to allow connections coming in. So I'm going to change the firewall settings, more I'm going to turn off the firewall so that the domain controller will be able to connect to the system. And at this point, I'm going to go to computer name. I'm going to change. I'm going to call it node 1. And the domain is ktg.local, ktg.local. And I'm going to say, there's something we need to do first. Once we have created the domain, we need to create a user account in this domain. So I'm going to go to tools and go to Active Directory, users and computers. I'm going to create a user that have a privilege to join systems onto the domain. So we need to create a user that have a privilege to join computers onto this domain. So go to users, right click and say new user. And I'm going to use my name. And the username is going to be Heinsohn. Okay, I'm going next, and the passwords. And then I don't want the users to change the password, so let me just go next, finish. So we've created a user, and that is fine. So we are going to use this user now to join the system to the domain. So I'm going to come here and say okay. So it's going to ask us to specify a user that has privilege to join to domain. So it's going to be Heinsohn. And say okay. So node 1, it says welcome to ktg.local domain. So I'm saying okay. I'm going to say okay as well. I'm going to close, and it's going to prompt us to restart the system. I'm going to restart. We are going to also to node 2, and we are going to do the same thing. First, we are going to set the DNS IP to point to the domain controller IP. So I'm going to turn off the firewall. So I'm going to firewall. I'm going to turn it off. All right, so turn off firewall from here. Turn off as well. Say okay. Okay, next I'm going to go to Ethernet and change. I'm going to click on this. Sorry, not here. I'm going to right click or change adapter options and right click on the adapter and choose properties. Remember, you have to turn off IP version 6 and configure IP version 4. In this case, we are changing the properties to set the DNS server address to point to the domain controller. So I'm going to say 192.168.1.90. Alternate DNS can be anything. And say OK and close. And next we would like to, let me just close up this windows as well. Next we would like to allow remote connections to this computer. So I'm going to go to properties, go to change settings, remote, allow remote connections, okay, apply, computer name, and just go to change here and give it node 2. And we are going to join domain ktg.local and say okay. This is okay. So I think I missed the password. So I'm going to say okay. Say okay as well. I'm going to close and I'm going to restart the system. So now we've been able to join the two systems onto the domain. How do we know that we've joined the system to the domain? We are going to go to the domain controller and we are going to go to tools and go to Active Directory users and computers and go to computers. So you can see node 1 and node 2. So if you've come up to this point, thumbs up to you. I'm going to stop here for now so that in the next part, we are now going to see how to set permissions and see other things we can do in a domain. For now, if you right click on the system, you can see a number of things you can do. You can manage, you can do remote desktop, you can do just a whole lot of things, including installing applications onto the system. So we are going to be gradually looking into all these things you can do on Windows Server Administration 2019. So I'm going to stop here. I'm Heinsohn the Tech Pro. Remember to subscribe to my channel if you've not subscribed, and also leave me a comment if you have any question whatsoever.